The auction hall buzzed with the low hum of expensive cologne and quiet predatory ambition. Sunlight, sliced thin by the grand arched windows of the old city courthouse, glinted off Rolexes and diamond earrings. It was a room that reeked of money, a place where fortunes were made and lost on the swing of a gavel. And into this arena of gilded wolves walked Elara, a lamb dressed in a simple, well-worn gray dress, her only accessory a battered leather portfolio clutched to her chest like a shield. Heads turned, not in admiration, but in a collective, dismissive curiosity. She was an anomaly, a glitch in the opulent matrix. Whispers followed her like the rustle of dry leaves. Is she lost? Maybe she's a courier. The most venomous barbs came from the epicenter of the room's arrogance, the Sterling brothers, Julian and Marcus. The Sterlings were real estate royalty in this city, a dynasty built on ruthless acquisitions and concrete monoliths that scraped the sky. They saw the city not as a collection of homes and histories, but as a monopoly board they were determined to own. Julian, the elder, with his perfectly coiffed silver hair and a smile that never touched his cold, calculating eyes, leaned towards his younger, brasher brother. "Look what the cat dragged in," Marcus sneered, his voice a stage whisper designed to carry. "Probably thinks this is a casting call for a charity commercial. Help the unfortunate." Their coterie of sycophants chuckled, a hyena's chorus. Elara felt the heat of their stares, a familiar, prickling sensation she had grown accustomed to over the years. She didn't react. Her grandmother's words were a constant, soothing mantra in her mind. Let them underestimate you, little bird. A quiet hunter is the most dangerous. She found a seat at the back, away from the main players, her movements deliberate and calm. She wasn't here for the theater of it all. She was here for the final act. The prize today was the Nightingale, a beautiful, crumbling old Victorian mansion on a sprawling, tree-lined plot overlooking the river. It was the last piece of prime, undeveloped land in the prestigious West End. For the Sterlings, it was the future site of Sterling Towers II, a soulless glass and steel monstrosity that would block the sun and displace a century of memories. For Elara, the Nightingale was everything. It was the smell of her grandfather's pipe tobacco, the echo of her grandmother's laughter in the cavernous kitchen, the feel of the cool, smooth wood of the banister under her small hand. It was home, a home her family had lost 2 generations ago in a poker game with the Sterling brothers' equally unscrupulous grandfather. A game, her grandfather had always sworn, that was rigged. The bidding started, a rapid-fire volley of numbers that escalated with dizzying speed. Elara remained still, her hand resting on the worn leather of her portfolio. She didn't flinch as the price soared past 10 million, then 15. The room was a blur of raised paddles and tense faces. Soon, it was just the Sterlings bidding against a rival firm, their arrogance a tangible force in the room. Finally, the rival firm tapped out. The auctioneer, a man with a booming voice and a face flushed with excitement, pointed his gavel at the Sterling brothers. 15,500,000, going once, going twice. Julian Sterling rose, a smug, triumphant smile playing on his lips. He adjusted his silk tie, a preening gesture of victory. "A glorious day for progress," he declared to the room at large. "Sold!" The gavel fell with a crack that echoed like a gunshot. "To Sterling Holdings!" A ripple of applause went through the room. The Sterlings shook hands, clapped each other on the back, their laughter echoing the casual cruelty of their earlier remarks. They had their prize. The Nightingale was theirs to tear down, to erase. As the crowd began to disperse, the Sterlings and their legal team made their way to the signing table, a grand mahogany affair set up at the front of the room. The contracts, thick and imposing, were laid out, waiting for the final damning signatures. This was her cue. Elara stood up, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. She walked towards the front of the room, her footsteps unnervingly loud in the suddenly quiet space. All eyes were on her again, but this time the curiosity was tinged with irritation. "Excuse me," she said, her voice clear and steady, cutting through the celebratory chatter. Julian Sterling turned, his smile faltering as he saw her. "I believe you're mistaken, miss. The public viewing is over." "She can't afford anything here," Marcus added with a dismissive wave of his hand. "Security, can we get some help here?" Their lawyer, a portly man with a perpetually furrowed brow, looked at Elara over the top of his spectacles. "This is a private signing, young lady. If you have a grievance, you can file it with the city." "I have no grievance with the city," Elara said, her gaze locked on Julian. "My business is with you and with this contract." She had reached the table. With a slow, deliberate movement, she unclasped her leather portfolio. The room held its breath. What could this girl, this nobody, possibly have in that worn-out case? A petition? A sentimental photograph? She drew out a single yellowed piece of paper, its edges brittle with age, the ink faded but still legible. It was a deed, the original deed to the Nightingale, dated 1922. She laid it gently on top of the Sterling's multi-million-dollar contract. The lawyer scoffed. "A historical document. Quaint, but irrelevant. The city holds the title now." "Please," Elara said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, yet commanding the attention of everyone around the table. "Read the addendum, specifically the reversionary clause." A flicker of unease crossed the lawyer's face. A reversionary clause? It was an archaic, rarely used legal instrument. He picked up the old deed, his brow furrowed in concentration. The Sterlings exchanged impatient glances. "What is this nonsense?" Marcus blustered. Elara ignored him. "My great-grandfather, Arthur Pendleton, was a man who loved nature more than money. When he sold this land to the city, he did so under a specific legally binding condition. A condition he had his lawyers fortify with a reversionary clause, should it ever be broken." The lawyer's face had gone pale. He looked up from the document, his eyes wide with disbelief. "This can't be." "What is it, Henderson?" Julian demanded, his voice sharp. Henderson swallowed hard. "The clause states that the property, in perpetuity, must be used for a purpose that serves the community's natural and aesthetic well-being. It explicitly forbids the construction of any commercial structure exceeding 2 stories in height." A collective gasp went through the small crowd that had gathered. "And the reversionary clause?" Elara prompted gently. Henderson looked as if he was about to be sick. "The clause stipulates that should any owner of the property attempt to violate these terms, the title to the property and all land associated with it automatically reverts to the heirs of Arthur Pendleton." The silence in the room was absolute, a crushing weight. The Sterling brothers stood frozen, their faces a mask of stunned disbelief. The triumphant smiles had vanished, replaced by a ghastly, slack-jawed horror. "That's preposterous!" Julian finally managed to sputter, his voice a strangled rasp. "That's 100 years old. It wouldn't hold up in court." "Wouldn't it?" Elara's voice was like ice. "My legal team seems to think it will. They've been researching it for the past 5 years, ever since I inherited this document from my grandmother. A document your grandfather conveniently lost after he cheated mine. Luckily, my great-grandfather was a meticulous man. He filed a duplicate with the county archives, buried so deep in the records it took my lawyers 3 years to find it." She looked from Julian to Marcus, her gaze unwavering. "You just stood here and publicly declared your intention to build Sterling Towers 2 on this land. A 40-story commercial skyscraper. You have, in front of multiple witnesses, announced your intention to violate the covenant. Which means," she paused, letting the weight of her next words settle, "as of this moment, you don't actually own anything." She gently picked up the old deed, her fingers tracing the faded signature of her great-grandfather. "The Nightingale belongs to me." The color drained from Julian's face. Marcus looked as if he was about to have an apoplectic fit. Their lawyer was frantically thumbing through his own copy of the contract, as if hoping to find a magical loophole that would make this all go away. But there was none. In their arrogance, in their haste to acquire the property, they had overlooked the one thing that truly mattered: its history. They had seen a plot of land, a number on a spreadsheet. They had failed to see the legacy woven into the very soil. You can't do this," Marcus stammered, his bravado completely gone. "I can," Elara said, a quiet strength radiating from her. "You see, you laughed because you thought I couldn't afford to buy this place. And you were right. I can't. But I didn't need to. My family already paid the price, a long time ago." She turned and walked away, leaving the Sterling brothers standing amidst the ruins of their grand ambition, the multi-million-dollar contract now a worthless piece of paper. She didn't look back. She didn't need to see the chaos erupting behind her, the frantic phone calls, the dawning realization of their utter and complete humiliation. She walked out of the courthouse and into the afternoon sun, the old leather portfolio held loosely at her side. She didn't feel triumphant, not in the way the Sterlings had. She felt a deep, quiet sense of peace, a sense of justice finally served. Later that week, she visited the Nightingale. She walked through the overgrown gardens, the scent of honeysuckle and damp earth filling the air. She ran her hand over the peeling paint of the porch railing, the same railing she had clung to as a child. This wasn't about money or power. It was about reclaiming a piece of her family's soul, about honoring the memory of a great-grandfather who believed that some things were more valuable than gold. The news of the Sterlings' downfall spread like wildfire through the city. They became a cautionary tale, a symbol of arrogance brought low by a quiet, unassuming woman with a piece of paper. Elara, with the help of a community land trust and a team of passionate historical preservationists, began the slow, loving process of restoring the Nightingale. It would not be a private residence, but a public park and a small museum, a place where children could play and families could picnic, a place that would, as her great-grandfather had intended, serve the community's natural and aesthetic well-being. One evening, as she stood on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink, she thought of the Sterling brothers. She didn't feel anger or pity. She felt a strange sense of gratitude. Their mockery, their derision, their blind arrogance had been the very thing that had fueled her determination. They had laughed because they thought she couldn't afford anything. But she had walked away with something priceless, something they could never understand, a legacy reclaimed, a promise kept, a quiet victory that was worth more than all the money in the world.